Dear learners, I welcome you to this class on United Nations and Human Rights, UN Charter, UDHR, ICCPR, ICSCR. Yesterday we had our discussion on United Nations contribution to promote human rights, and we discussed about the UN Charter, what are the provisions in the preamble of the UN Charter, and what are the specific provisions of human rights in the UN Charter that we discussed. That background must be in your mind, and after that, we are going to discuss today the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, here we go like this. First of all, we will be discussing introduction and then cornerstones of the UDHR, then significance of the UDHR, then impact of the UDHR. After that, we will be discussing, the provisions. First of all, we will start from the preamble and then provisions of the UDHR, and then we will conclude. As noted in the previous class, the UN Charter has specifically mentioned in the preamble and several other articles that to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights is among its priorities. So, as we discussed that, although United Nations was established to save succeeding generation from the scourge of war or to maintain international peace and security, this was the main task because after the Second World War, the pacifist sentiments were very high, and that is why people across the globe wanted to avoid future war like World War II and World War First. And this was the reason that they wanted some kind of organization, an international organization, a supranational body which could prevent future wars. And that is why the United Nations was established. But you see, when the United Nations was established and when the great leaders of the world were discussing what kind of organization it should be, they realized that just prevention of war should not be the only goal. Of course, that is one of the most important goal: peaceful settlement of international disputes and the prevention of wars. But at the same time, in the normal times also, you'll find that the people face many difficulties. For hunger, starvation, poverty, unemployment, and other health issues, all these things. So this was the reason that they included in it the human rights or the promotion of human rights as one of the important goals or the purposes of the establishment of human rights. Uh, After that, you will find that in the UN Charter there is preamble and several articles also we discussed that how the several articles of the United Nations UN Charter, they are also mentioning about human rights and what should be the role of the United Nations in promoting human rights across the globe. The adoption of UDHR by the UNGA, that is United Nations General Assembly, is one of the significant steps in promoting human rights across the globe. As we mentioned that United Nations wanted to promote human rights because human rights were threatened during the war, and after the war the situation was like that. So this was the reason that the UN wanted to promote it, and that's why in the UN Charter, of course, there was mention of human rights, but specific provisions. If you see that what should be the human rights that United Nations is going to promote, that was still it was yet not designed, it was yet not made clear, and of course the charter was not designed for that particular purpose. So ultimately you'll find this task was entrusted upon the General Assembly and the Economic and Social Council, and then the specialized body that was the UN Human Rights Commission. So from there onward, you'll find that from 1945 onward, the United Nations was already trying to develop a consensus on the catalog of rights. From 1946, it started. You see, it started the work of drafting the UDHR, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a landmark document that outlines the fundamental rights and freedoms of all human beings. So, First of all, what happened that from 1946 to 1948, you will find the drafting was going on. Experts were there from the different kind of background, from different countries, and the people from different continents and countries were there. Men and women, they all were represented, and they prepared this document, which was brought before the General Assembly. This UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is a landmark document that outlines the fundamental rights and freedoms of all human beings. That is the beauty. It is also known as the Magna Carta of all mankind. Interestingly, you see that we have been discussing the evolution of the concept of human rights from Magna Carta, Magna Carta of England, that was 1215. And we also discussed that certain concessions were given to the barons or the nobility or the clergy at that time. You cannot say that it was such a major document. But here, what is happening? The UDHR is specifically being designed to promote human rights all over the world. And that's why when it was completed, the draft was completed and adopted by the General Assembly, Mrs. Roosevelt, who was the chairperson, she said that it is the Magna Carta of all mankind. This is the significance of this particular document. The United Nations General Assembly declares in the preamble, if you see the preamble of this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, then UNGA, that is United Nations General Assembly, declares in the preamble that it means UDHR, is the common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations. Important, you see. That, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, why it is such an important document? Because it is being, it is being claimed that it is the UNGA, that is United Nations General Assembly, which is representing the collective wisdom of the people of the world. That is declaring that the UDHR will be the common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations. No exception at all. So, this is the significance. The UDHR, that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was adopted on 10 December 1948 by the United Nations General Assembly. And since then, 10 December is celebrated as International Human Rights Day. You see, 10 December is celebrated as International Human Rights Day all over the world. And why the 10th December was chosen? Because this was the day when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. So just to commemorate that occasion, because such an important document or the instrument of human rights was adopted by the United Nations. So that is why every year we find that International Human Rights Day is celebrated, observed all over the world every year on 10 December. So the learners, you can also organize International Human Rights Day in your locality, and you can sensitize people about the rights that are mentioned in the UDHR. The UDHR has been a powerful tool for promoting positive change worldwide. Again, see that it has been a powerful tool for promoting positive change worldwide. And what are these, positive change that we are going to highlight very soon? But, this is an important development. Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of American President Franklin D. Roosevelt, chaired the UDHR drafting committee. There was a drafting committee, and that was chaired by Mrs. Roosevelt, who was the wife of President Roosevelt of the United States of America. And she played a very important role in developing consensus on the catalog of rights that have been mentioned in the UDHR. So that is why salute to the people, those who drafted this UDHR. Again, from our country's point of view, and we must feel proud that Hansa Mehta was an Indian delegate to the UN Human Rights Commission, and she her intervention, basically, Hansa Mehta's intervention, is noteworthy. And that is why, we should feel proud. Why? Because she played an important role in the drafting of the UDHR. And what is the great achievement of the Indian delegate Hansa Mehta when Article 1 was, Article 1, keep in mind, Article, it has been mentioned, but here we have to remember that it was Article 1 was of UDHR was proposed. So, what was the language? The language was all men are born free and equal. This was the language in the proposed draft of Article 1 of the UDHR. All men are born free and equal. You can feel here that, this language is not gender sensitive, it is not inclusive. Then the Indian delegate, Hansa Mehta, intervened and proposed to make it more inclusive by replacing men with human beings. And it was accepted with appreciation. Now you see that it is not all men, rather all human beings are born free and equal. This was because of the intervention of Hansa Mehta. So India, the Indian delegate or India as a country played, such an important role in the drafting of the UDHR. The UDHR recognizes the inherent dignity and equal worth of every person, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or social status, and emphasizes the importance of protecting the rights for a just and peaceful society. You see, this was the time when all the parts of the world were not free. There were many, many countries who were reeling under colonialism and imperialism, and they were facing what is called, racism or racial discrimination. Apartheid-like situation was there in many, many countries. Of course, it was there in South Africa, but you will find that racial discrimination was a common practice in many, colonies. So at that time, what is being proclaimed through UDHR? That inherent dignity and equal worth of every person. So that is why, it is trying to promote the spirit of equality and recognizing the dignity of every person, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or social status, and emphasizes the importance of protecting these rights for a just and peaceful society. Keep in mind that for a just and peaceful society. So these human rights which have been proclaimed in the UDHR, they are for establishing or achieving the goal of a just and peaceful society. So here we find that rights are becoming precondition for enjoyment of justice and peace in a particular society. So that is why, this is very important. It continues to be a guiding force in the development of international human rights law and has inspired numerous national constitutions and legal frameworks. Yes, it continues to be a guiding force. You'll find that it is cited in most of the treaties of human rights, or it is cited in the national constitution. It is cited in the debates, discussions, deliberations in the various national legislatures. The UDHR is such an important document, and it has inspired numerous national constitution and legal frameworks that we will explore, later on. That what kind of legal frameworks at the international or regional level it has influenced or it has inspired, that is important. Today, the declaration remains a living document. It is the most translated document in the world, and it has been translated into over 500 languages. You see, you can understand the significance of this particular document, that it has been translated into over 500 languages. The UDHR was the first globally acknowledged and globally agreed document that marked all human beings as being free and equal, regardless of sex, color, creed, religion, or other characteristics. You see, all human beings are free and equal. At the time of colonialism, when many countries were still reeling under colonialism, so at that time, it is being asserted that all human beings are free and equal, regardless of their sex, color, creed, religion, or other characteristics. So, in this way, you can also say, in the countries or in the post-colonial societies like ours, we can celebrate this document. Why? Because it has also inspired, motivated, legitimized the national liberation struggles in the different parts of the world. So that is why UDHR is one of the best documents of human rights. When you analyze the principles and the main provisions in the UDHR, you will find that UDHR rests on three key pillars. And these three key pillars are: number one, equality. That is being emphasized. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So equality becomes a very, very important cornerstone of the UDHR. Then dignity. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. The dignity is a right to life, liberty, and security of person. It means the dignified existence of human beings have been recognized. It has been recognized, dignified existence. So it means right to life, when it is saying, it is also mentioning the dignity. It is not animal like existence. It is that right to a dignified life, that is being recognized, where people will have liberty and security of person. Then the third important thing which is being emphasized, and that is the key pillar, and that is freedom. According to this UDHR, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly and association. This freedom is being proclaimed, that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly and association. So, a global ethics, a global culture of human rights becomes the aim here, that where the people should feel that they have freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly and association. These principles form the foundation for a just and equitable society where every individual can flourish. So, this is creating a space for every individual in the world where, they can feel free and in a conducive, congenial environment where there is no threat to their life, liberty, and their, freedom of conscience. They can develop their personality to the fullest extent. They can utilize their potentials. They can, develop their own peculiar characteristics if they have got any. All these things are being emphasized. The UDHR, as you know, has a preamble and 30 articles. And its 30 articles encompass a wide range of rights. This is again, you should see that it is being adopted in 1948, but you'll find that a wide range of rights have been included under it. Some of these are right to life, liberty, and security of person. So this foundational right ensures protection from arbitrary arrest, torture, and slavery. Then right to non-discrimination. Again, the principles prohibits discrimination based on any factor and guarantees equal access to rights and opportunities. So, non-discrimination, it means the inherent message And the integral component of this particular document or instrument of human rights is that you will find what is being emphasized, that there should be no discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, creed, sex, place of birth, etc. So, right to non-discrimination, that is being recognized. Right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This also allows individuals to hold and express their beliefs without fear of persecution. So again, then only a just society can be established when the people are enjoying these rights. Then we have a right to freedom of expression. This empowers individuals to share their opinions and ideas freely, fostering open and just societies. So freedom of expression, you can understand that, how important it is, freedom of expression. The people should be free to write, speak, and have some kind of opinion about anything. And they should also be allowed to share it through different channels. Today, it may be many, many things, but at that time, you see, that freedom would have been, that freedom is to be accepted and respected by the governments. That becomes the duty. So, this empowers individuals to share their opinion and idea freely, fostering open and just societies. Then, these rights that we were mentioning here, they are of course for generation human rights. After that, right to work, social security, and an adequate standard of living. You know, this is second generation human rights. You see, this is being emphasized. So this ensures protection from exploitation and guarantees access to basic necessities for a dignified life. So that is why right to work, social security, and an adequate standard of living, all they are important for a dignified life. So that is why it is recognizing, this UDHR is recognizing that this is the right of the people. Then right to education. UDHR fosters individual development and empowers citizens to participate meaningfully in the society. And this is possible only when the people are having knowledge, education. Ignorance is not bliss in this sense. So, right to education is being recognized, where the people have access to schools, colleges, and or whatever methods of teaching or knowledge imparting is there, that must be there. That is being recognized through this particular declaration. After this, we are going to discuss the significance of UDHR. If this document is there, what is the significance of UDHR, that we are going to discuss. So, UDHR is not a legally binding document, but has acquired legal and moral status. That is important to again remind, that UDHR is not a legally binding document. Since it is a declaration, it is not a treaty or covenant or convention. So that is why there is no implementation mechanism you will find in it. So the UDHR is not a legally binding document. Neither you will find any kind of implementation mechanism in it. But what has happened, that because of its significance, you see what is happening, or the utility for all the countries and people. So it has acquired legal and moral status and is recognized as customary international law. So although it may not be binding, it does not have implementation mechanism, but you will find it has assumed the status of customary international law. And it, legal and moral status, of course, morally, on the morally respectable ground, you can claim the rights that have been listed in this UDHR. Again, it has inspired 3 regional instruments of human rights. That also we should see. The European Convention on Human Rights 1950, inspired by UDHR. Just after 2 years it was, adopted. That is European Convention on Human Rights, 1950. After that, we have the American Convention on Human Rights, 1969. That was also inspired by the UDHR. And then the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, 1981. So you will find that in the 3 continents, what is the impact, that the UDHR has inspired many regional instruments, namely these three regional instruments, that African, American, and European instruments of human rights, regional instruments of human rights, they were adopted because of or under the influence of UDHR. So this is the achievement. Besides, these regional instruments of human rights that UDHR has inspired, we also find that it has inspired countries to include human rights provisions in their respective constitutions. Again, important. So, this UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, has inspired many countries to include human rights provisions in their respective constitutions. In our own country, you will find when the constitution was being framed and when the great leaders of the freedom struggle, they were trying to develop the catalog of rights that the Constitution of India was going to recognize as fundamental rights, or the rights that were going to be included in the directive principles of state policy. All these things were being discussed at that time. UDHR had already come into existence, and since it had come into existence, so that is why it had a lot of influence on the constitution making in our country as well. So that is why you can say it has inspired countries to include human rights provisions in their respective constitutions. Again, it is the most cited human rights document in the world. So, United Nations has adopted many instruments of human rights. There are many treaties, conventions, covenants, and declarations. But you will find among all these, human rights instruments, you will find the UDHR is the most cited human rights document in the world. So that is also one of the important aspects or the significance of this particular UDHR we should keep in mind. It is also considered to be the authoritative interpretation of the UN Charter. You see how to interpret United Nations Charter. So in a way, you will find that UDHR is cited most of the time because this is again, it was adopted by the General Assembly with almost consensus. You see, it was not opposed by countries. So that is why when this is such a document which developed, consensus building is a very, very difficult task. So through UDHR, you will find United Nations is also getting legitimacy when it is adopting this kind of UDHR, and people are accepting it. It becomes a universal, document. So that it is also considered to be the authoritative interpretation of the UN Charter. So the UN Charter that is there, or the provisions of the UN Charter, are interpreted with reference to the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that is why, it becomes a guide, a key to understand the charter, its purposes, its goal, and what are the provisions. So that is why that is an important, that is an important aspect of this UDHR. After the significance of UDHR, we will take up the impact of the UDHR. And when we are going to discuss the impact of the UDHR, first of all, since its adoption, the UDHR has served as a powerful tool for promoting positive change in different parts of the world. You see, there is no doubt in it that UDHR has served as a powerful tool for promoting positive change in the different parts of the world, because you see, it has inspired people to demand rights. It has inspired people to talk about, the universal standard that a country should have while dealing with them. Here are some concrete examples. What are the manifestations of the impact of the UDHR that we are going to discuss? In the manifestations, first of all, you will find end of apartheid in South Africa. So the UDHR's principle of non-discrimination became a rallying cry for anti-apartheid activists, ultimately contributing to the dismantling of this oppressive system. So here you will find, since it was a universal acceptability was there, to the UDHR. So that is why this was adopted, and then it led to the movements in the different parts of the world. And one of the best manifestations of the the positive impact of the UDHR is end of apartheid in South Africa. So with this, we are going to wind up our lecture today, and in the next class or in the next lecture, we will continue with the impact of the UDHR. So, dear learners, now you should wait for the next lecture where we will continue with our impact of the UDHR. And so far, we have already discussed, what is the significance of UDHR, and then how it was drafted, what is the role that India has played, and that is why you must feel proud that Hansa Mehta positively intervened, and because of her intervention, you see the language of the UDHR has been made gender sensitive or inclusive. All these things we have discussed in the class. In continuation, after this lecture, we will discuss the impact of the UDHR, means we will continue. Thank you very much.